Hey, it's Matt Robeson, and here's our latest episode of Political Rehab, our mashup of PTI meets The Daily Show, where a Republican and a Democrat try our best to have a good time with the week's news. Programming note, both Matt and I are sick, and so you're going to hear it in our voices today. Sorry about that. And I'll also note that this episode was previously recorded. Here we go.
That should concern Republicans. That kind of nonsense cost us elections.
I think the people who are involved need to find totally different jobs.
He knew it and did it anyway. And he risked everything that he has trained his entire life to do.
The most significant polling number that I've seen in a long time, and it means big trouble for MAGA. Welcome to Political Rehab, smart politics without the hangover. I'm Matt.
And I'm Matt.
Today, House Republicans slap Trump an embarrassing faceplant from Jeanine Pirro, a shocking new number in the Epstein files, a Pam Bondi low point, and ICE finally retreats in Minnesota. But let's start, as always, with our Trump dump.
Time for the Trump dump.
That's right. Time for the Trump dump, because it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, Democrat, or independent. There's something Donald Trump did this week that pissed you off.
And last week, an exchange between CNN's Caitlin Collins and President Trump got a lot of attention, and justifiably so. In response to being pressed on the Epstein files situation, Trump responded with another one of his classically sexist and demeaning attacks on a female professional doing her job.
What would you say to people
like
who feel like they haven't gotten
healthcare
justice, Mr. President?
Something that people care about. Yeah, what do you say? Go ahead.
What would you say to
are
the
so
survivors
bad.
who feel like they haven't gotten
You are the
justice?
worst reporter. No wonder CNN has no ratings because of people like you. She's a young woman. I don't think I've ever seen you smile. I've known you for 10 years. I don't think I've ever seen a smile on your face.
Now, this wasn't quite as brazen as the quiet piggy outrage of a couple of months ago, but of course, it's no less horrible. But there's another layer to this that's worth paying attention to, and that seems like it hasn't quite gotten as much attention as it should. And actually, Ms. Collins points it out right there in the video.
Why? You know why you're not smiling? Because you know you're not telling the truth. And you're a very dishonest organization, and they should be ashamed of you.
Did you catch that? Why would she smile while asking about horrifying sexual assaults? And here's another one for you. Here's Vice President J.D. Vance afterwards defending Trump's response. He said, it's actually like so perceptive, even if you're asking a tough question, even if you take your job very seriously, like, why does it always have to be so antagonistic? Boy, just picture him putting on the eyeliner while he says that, right? And that's the point that really bears scrutiny. Trump knows that when he's cornered, he can behave outrageously and shift attention. And we've gotten so used to it that not a single colleague of Caitlin Collins followed up with Trump to say, actually, you didn't answer her question, so now I'm going to ask it. And we've gotten so used to this entire administration prostrating themselves to kiss Trump's ass that no one pauses to pick apart the incredible illogic of the vice president of the United States saying, yeah, Trump was being really perceptive when he pointed out that a question about assault should have been asked with a smile. Just very stable genius stuff there. That's ultimately the thing here. It's not news to point out that the man, Donald Trump, is a pathological lowlife, and he acts like it all the time. But we shouldn't lose sight of the way his horrible behavior is affecting and infecting the behavior of everyone else in his administration, his party, and the media. We can only hope that when all of this is over, they'll look back and feel a measure of the shame that they really should.
Now, I really didn't like the halftime show. I admit my biggest problem was that it was all in Spanish. Truth is, if it wasn't for Happy Gilmore 2 and Saturday Night Live, I probably wouldn't even know who Bad Bunny was. Normal people stop there. They say, not for me, and move on. But not MAGA. Cue the meltdown, cue the outrage, cue the think pieces about how America is collapsing because of global megastore performed in Spanish. Just take a look at what Megyn Kelly had to say.
This is supposed to be a unifying event for the country, not for the Latinos, not for one small group, but for the country. We don't need a black national anthem. We don't need a Spanish-speaking, non-English performer, and we don't need an ICE or America hater featured as our primetime entertainment.
Talk about triggered. And unifying, that's not the job of the NFL. The NFL is a business. It wants the biggest possible audience. The halftime show is part of that. Putting one of the most streamed artists in the world on that stage is not conspiracy. It's capitalism. And last I checked, Republicans believe in capitalism. And if you don't like it, change the channel. That's how markets work. Even Trump didn't change the channel. He didn't watch Kid Rock. He watched Bad Bunny. Truth is, this is all part of the outrage economy where your anger is currency for Donald Trump. It's how he controls you. Most of MAGA has become nothing more than mind-numb robots, parroting absurdity, anger over stupid things, convinced that every cultural moment is an existential threat. And here's the part that should concern Republicans. That kind of nonsense cost us elections. In 2024, Trump won 48% of Hispanic votes, the highest mark for a Republican in half a century. But recent polling shows Latino approval numbers sliding fast. 2/3 said their situation is worse than a year ago. 65% oppose the administration's immigration approach. And what are we doing? Picking a fight over a Spanish language halftime show. That's not strategy. That's self-sabotage. It feels like we're trying to lose. And the hypocrisy is breathtaking. Trump mocked the performance, saying nobody understands a word. Really? Because I seem to remember a 2020 Trump campaign ad in Spanish targeting Puerto Rico voters where Bad Bunny is from.
Por 47 años, Joe Biden y los demócratas ignoraron a Puerto Rico. Biden destruyó a la isla cuando nos quitó la 936. Pero gracias al presidente Trump.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
I guess Spanish is fine when you're asking for votes, but it's a problem when someone else uses it on a stage. That's how you know the outrage is fake. And fake outrage may fire up the base, but it drives away the middle. And when you lose the middle, you lose elections.
I wonder how Megyn Kelly feels about Donald Trump throwing paper towels at Latinos. Let's go to our rundown. First up, the U.S. House votes to reverse Canada tariffs in a massive rebuke to President Trump. 6 House Republicans voting with all the Democrats against the tariffs. Why? Because, says Republican Representative Don Bacon, we're paying for it economically. No duh. Matt, what does this mean?
First of all, it's about damn time. Republicans in Congress finally seem like they may have grown a backbone. It is their job here to hold checks and balances. It is their job to control tariff policy. They, for too long, have been lapdogs for the president. Now they sort of seem to be doing something. Americans are suffering. The economy's in the toilet. Look, it's time that they finally do this. They need to continue to push forward. Otherwise, we're just going to see an ass kicking this November, and the economy is just going to continue to collapse.
I think the story politically is another slide down the ramp to Trump's total irrelevance. After this vote, Trump issued hollow threats on Truth Social against the 6 Republicans. Turns out they basically can tell him to go pound sand. 2 of them are retiring, so they really don't give a shit about what he says. One is getting pushed out of office because of the redistricting war that Trump started. And some of them are in districts that are pretty marginal. So it's not like putting forward a MAGA Republican to take down the incumbent Republican would actually help Republicans. It would essentially be cutting off his elephant's trunk to spite his face. We saw it with MTG. We saw it with Lauren Boebert saying no to the Star Chamber over the Epstein files. We've seen it time and time again in recent months of Republicans in office finding the limits of how far they're willing to go for Trump. And those limits are getting tighter. And it's quite refreshing.
Yeah, and clearly it's an election year conversion for each and every one of them who are trying to hold on to their job or protect their legacy. But I think what you said earlier hits the nail right on the head. Trump's influence and the MAGA influence is waning. It's starting to crack. It's fall apart. That Republicans feel empowered to do a lot of this stuff is a good sign. It's not enough. We're still way off from where we should be as a Congress. Mike Johnson is an absolute unmitigated disaster, probably one of the worst speakers we've ever had. But now that we're starting to exercise some control, we are starting to get a little bit better. Next up, in another rebuke to Trump, his Justice Department, a federal grand jury in Washington, D.C. declined to indict 6 Democrat lawmakers who appeared in that video earlier this year, urging the U.S. military and intelligence personnel to refuse unlawful orders. Now, it's a stunning rebuke to the Trump Justice Department. Matt, what do you make of this?
Attorney General Pam Bondi, in her fractious hearing that we're going to cover in just a couple of minutes this week, announced weaponization has ended. This was news to the Republicans who weighing in on this effort to prosecute 6 Democratic lawmakers for pointing out what is, in fact, the law, which is you have an obligation, if you're in the military, to refuse unlawful orders. This whole attempt was indeed lawfare. That's what Senator Tom Tillis, Republican of North Carolina, said. He accused the administration of political lawfare. Chuck Grassley, noted liberal snowflake, that thankfully in this instance, a jury saw the attempted indictments for what they really were. Law enforcement people ought to be spending their time on making our community safe. The failed political driven legal attempts to go after James Comey, Letitia James, Jerome Powell, Lisa Cook, Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell, Jack Smith, and the sandwich hoagie thrower DC ICE case. And I should point out that this is not the first time that Jeanine Pirro has gotten whacked in the face by a grand jury in what is, as you said, extraordinarily rare. It actually happened 8 separate times in September where grand juries refused to return indictments. And it just goes to show that not only is this like a vast political retribution campaign, but it's being carried out by total incompetence.
What's happening with this administration is all about getting that first headline. It's all about looking tough. This was a victory for free speech. It was a victory for upholding the rule of law, because what they also said was essentially quoting the handbook. And we hope the military would refuse illegal orders.
New Epstein document releases generated headlines, and you see these ultra wealthy people getting away with some pretty horrible things with some pretty horrible people. What struck you in all of this?
A couple of things struck me in this one. First, the fallout. Part of Trump's coalition, part of what brought MAGA back to power was the transparency angle. And I find it funny that you see people like J.D. Vance say, I don't understand why you're so mad because Trump was the one who finally did this. Never mind the fact that he had to do it kicking and screaming. Never mind the fact that it's been bungled so badly. Never mind the fact that there's been cover up after cover up. I think the Epstein files, the legacy of it is really going to be one of those nails in that MAGA coalition that just completely destroys it. I see a lot of hardline conservatives, hardline MAGA people who have worked for Trump in every campaign, were diehard, are just done with it. And it feels like Republicans are continuing to try to protect a pedophile, and that is never going to be the right spot. And that creates real long-term problems for Republicans and MAGA. The other thing that I think is not getting enough attention out there is there's this report that in the mid-2000s, Trump had a conversation with a police officer saying, I'm finally glad you're going after this guy. We all kind of know what he's doing. And on face value, it sounds like, oh, yeah, no, he did the right thing. But no, if you dig deeper here, what it really sounds like is everybody knew this stuff was happening, including Donald Trump. Doesn't mean Trump did anything illegal. It just means he knew this was happening. And it goes back to the credibility of everything Donald Trump has been saying. It's bad messaging, bad policy, and it's blowing up in our face.
And it also happens to not be true, because the major thing that emerged for me this week is he knew, but he continued to associate. He continued to let it happen, essentially. And I did a little video about it on the Worth Knowing YouTube yesterday. Times Donald Trump's name appears in the Epstein files that his Department of Justice released to the public? About 38,000. 38,000. But that's not the news. The news is that Congressman Jamie Raskin went over to the DOJ to look at the original version of the files where they hadn't blacked out Trump's name. Do you know how many times Trump's name actually appears in the Epstein files before they went through with a Sharpie? More than 1 million. 1 million. Huh. Why would the DOJ go through and block out his name more than 950,000 times? I think that says it all.
Speaking of Epstein, Attorney General Pam Bondi faced intense questioning from Democrats and some Republicans about the Justice Department handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. including why the department initially redacted and withheld certain names and documents. Some of the highlights from yesterday: Bondi accused Massey of Trump derangement syndrome. She launched personal attacks on Democrats rather than sticking to procedural answers and reactions. Democrats accused her of shielding powerful names and mishandling victims. And the hearing became just combative, political. Matt, what's your take on what we saw in the Bondi hearing?
Absolute low point. Thomas Massey accused Pam Bondi of using cue cards that she's not smart enough to memorize. Her staff had prepared zingers and attacks and put downs. She said of Jamie Raskin, who is a celebrated constitutional law professor, she said, "You don't tell me anything, washed up loser lawyer, not even a lawyer." This is just some like sub kindergarten level stuff. And it's just completely humiliating for the people involved. I seriously think that when all of this is over, what it says to me is that the people who emerge in the wreckage of this is like a post-apocalyptic movie scenario, right? This is like Waterworld. Like if we're all on an atoll in the post-Trump America, trying to figure out like how to survive, I feel like we're going to have to find a way to hold people accountable for their role in all of this. I think the people who are involved in putting together cue cards like this need to just not be in politics anymore. They need to find totally different jobs. Like there has to be some kind of penalty for dragging American democracy down to this level.
Yeah, look, to me, it felt like she was an unhinged lunatic. And I say this about someone who I actually thought was probably going to be a good nominee to be attorney general. I know MAGA's cheering her on. One of the emails I received, I think it was last night, said Pam Bondi just dropped the bomb on Democrat Epstein hypocrites once and for all. And look, I got to say this once again. For the voters who decide elections, they're not cheering her on. They want answers on why no one is being held accountable. And you can't be an answer that no one is being prosecuted because the stock market's over 50,000. It looks like Republicans are protecting a pedophile. And if the goal was to hand the election to Democrats in 2028, not to mention the midterm, Pam Bondi accomplished that goal. But more importantly, she so failed the victim. She so failed the American people. She should be fired. Like, she cannot continue to serve in this role. She has been a disaster. She's been unhinged. It's a problem for all of us, and we can't continue that way.
Breaking news right as we started recording this, border czar Tom Homan, who was brought in to oversee the ICE presence in Minnesota, announced that the enforcement surge in the state will end, telling reporters that President Donald Trump has approved his request to conclude the operation. He said, "I will remain in Minnesota a little longer to oversee the drawdown to ensure its success." First of all, very interesting use of a military term, the drawdown, which we associate with forces in places like Afghanistan. But Matt, what do you make of this announcement after all of the horrible headlines of the past month or two?
It was clearly just a matter of time. Look, as we talked about, when Holman sort of becomes the voice of reason and all this, we've jumped the shark a little bit. I find it interesting that earlier this year, he was interviewed for a book, and one of his comments were about how these need to be targeted and these need to be within kind of American values. But for some reason, Noam and Bovino completely went out and militarized the whole situation. Minnesota is going to go down as how not to do enforcement. I do think if there is one good thing that's going to come out of those tragedies is going to be Americans stepping up and trying to take their country back, because we don't want our streets militarized. This is not what we voted for. This is not what we want. We want strong enforcement. We don't want military in the streets. And I do think we're starting to make that way. And that's why I think this was inevitable.
I can foresee that when we broadcast this episode live, there will be, because we always get people being a little trolly, there will be people saying, "Oh, you're for open borders. You're for letting all the illegals stay here." It's not what either of us are saying.
No.
It's not what most people in both parties believe. What we're against is a paramilitary attack on American communities and American citizens and on immigrants who are in those communities. We don't want to see violence this is not, as you said, the way to do enforcement. I agree with you that this was inevitable. There's a proud tradition in American politics of allowing a little bit of face-saving time to elapse before doing the inevitable step. Shoot, you saw it in the Cuban Missile Crisis when we made a secret deal with the Soviet Union to remove Jupiter missiles from Turkey. We just said, look, we can't make it public for 6 months. Tom Homan, this has been a plan probably in his back pocket ever since he arrived in Minneapolis, and now they're going through with it after a little bit of face-saving time. With that, let's get to our fun segment, Up or Down.
This is Up and Down, your political pulse check. Who crushed it? Who face planted and who needs a trip to political rehab?
First up, there was a story this week about AOC rising and how she has gotten a lot more clout between Mondami, between what's happened in New Jersey, her pick to win Mikey Sherrill's seat. She seems to have really sort of grown. Matt, AOC, up or down?
AOC is up. She's become a power broker in the Democratic Party. She raises a ton of money, $24 million in 2025. In the cycle before, it was something like $33 million between her PAC and her personal campaign. And she distributes that around progressive candidates. She's become a coveted endorsement, and her anti-oligarchy tour with Bernie Sanders was obviously a big draw. She's a power broker, and she's elevated herself, and she's matured a great deal since her Sunrise Coalition protests and Nancy Pelosi's office days. So she's an up.
See, I'm down on this one. I would have loved to have said this is greatest news in the world for us. She hasn't changed. She's still a radical. She's still a socialist. But in the age of Trump, AOC doesn't look fringe anymore. Trump has raised the temperature so much, and that shift may have made AOC more mainstream by comparison. He has essentially made socialism feel mainstream, and that scares me, and that's why I'm down.
Oh, so you're down on it. You agree that she's up, and you feel down about that. Love it.
Exactly.
Speaking of things that are confusingly up and down, new jobs numbers came out. Trump heralded a new golden age because January job growth was reported to be about 130,000 jobs, but it came with massive downward revisions to 2024 and 2025 jobs numbers. Matt, jobs, up or down?
All right, I am up on the jobs numbers, but I'm also down. Look, I am an optimist that I hope the economy is growing. I have my doubts, but we both know these things revise over and over again. Last year in 2025 was the worst job growth we've had in a long time. We are not in a golden age. I hope these numbers are real. I hope the 130,000 jobs are accurate. I'm going to say up because that's where I'm going to lean. But I could be down.
This is a clear down for me. 2024's job creation numbers were revised downward from 2 million to 1.2 million. That's a loss of 800,000 jobs. 2025 revised down from 584,000 to 181,000, a loss of 400,000 jobs. Put it together over the last 2 years, we actually are seeing 1.2 million fewer jobs than we thought we had created in America. For those keeping track at home, that is even more than the number of times that Donald Trump appears in the Epstein files. It goes to show, and by the way, so not only is that like hugely terrible, but why would I trust that we created 130,000 jobs in January? I clearly don't. This is a big down.
Next up, Gallup has reported that they're no longer going to do presidential approval ratings. They've been doing it since 1930s. It's been a benchmark of American political sentiment. But due to polling environment challenges, media economics, they're no longer going to do it. Matt, up or down on this one?
Down. You're in communications, you're in politics, you're an operative, you're a consultant. They said that this represents a strategic shift, reflecting research goals and priorities. That's why they're doing it. It's not because Donald Trump has achieved his lowest approval rating ever in their polling. He's gone down by 11 points since the start of his term, and they're afraid of blowback. That this is mealy-mouthed gobbledygook, and it's because they can't say the truth out loud. It's not just that they're getting rid of something that's actually of value to our understanding of politics. It's that they're doing it for craven political reasons, and they're trying to cover it up. Down, down, down.
I too am down. Hey, the one thing we know about polling is trends are the most important thing, because the one number is a snapshot in time. But when you look at polling and when you can go back to the 30s and begin to see what these things look like, they tell us a mood, they tell us a sentiment. It is a valuable tool when you start to look across it. And I think you're 100% correct. It is all because they're afraid that we're hitting historically low numbers. And it's just another case in point where institutions are caving and norms are becoming irrelevant. I too am down on this because I think it hurts us all in the long run.
Here's an instance of something that's very easy to rate as down, but maybe you'll like it. The IRS accidentally, boy, that word is doing a lot of work, shared confidential taxpayer data with the Department of Homeland Security, potentially violating federal privacy laws and exposing the government to lawsuits. Since this is being done under a Republican administration, clearly you love this, Matt Wiley. You love it. You want to say that they're up.
It's all an accident. I dropped it and they picked it up. I don't know what happened.
Mistakes were made.
Mistakes were made.
Called up my
I don't
boy.
know.
I said, hey, Christy, yo, I just finished shooting a dog in the face and I found some taxpayer data.
What am I going to do with this? This has to be yours. This is the second time in the last week where we have seen confidential data being released in ways that it shouldn't. It was Social Security data before. Now it's IRS tax data. I am for smaller, less government, as all Republicans should be. I don't like the sharing of this information. I don't like the releasing of this information.
I remember when John McCain appeared on Saturday Night Live as then Attorney General John Ashcroft, and in a parody said, I will not rest until every American has a barcode tattooed on their neck. Back to the future, baby.
Yes. I worked for Ashcroft. He's a great guy.
I do know this.
I
do
know
this. I know it's a little on the nose, but if the flu shits, man.
If you can't laugh at things, why are we doing this?
Yeah, get out of the kitchen.
Department of Homeland Security has hired a social media manager from the Department of Labor for a key communications job, despite posts he made on Labor Department media accounts that raise internal alarms over possible white nationalist messaging. Matt, up or down?
Oh, I'm up. I'm way, way up on this. First of all, this guy made his mark creating 1930s Germany-esque images and provocations online, and then he gets hired by this administration for an even bigger job. I did not see that coming. This is great. Every time these people reveal who they are, I like it. I like my Nazis highly visible. I want to know where they are. I want to know what they're up to. I want to know what jobs they hold. I don't want them like skulking around and like sneaking up on us. I want them in plain freaking sight. And one great thing about this administration is you see all the Nazis. They're all over the place.
I, of course, am down on this one. I think it's horrible that this administration continues to hire people that in any other administration anywhere else would just be kicked out before they even walked in. And the fact that we continue to double down and it gets reported and then we say we're not even going to do anything, he's still on board, just shows the complete lack of talent they have to bring in, and the fact that nobody really of any quality wants to work there, so they have to have white nationalist Nazis working. I'm down because this administration's a shit show, and it continues to prove that it's a shit show.
It really is amazing to me, just quick sidebar, how many competent Republicans like you that I know who are really good at doing politics, they can't get any of those people. No, they need to get the people who try out by being as Nazi as possible. It's so great.
And let's go one step further here. Now imagine telling my clients that we have to find a way to deal with this as a conversation when you're on the campaign trail, because these are the questions we get asked when we're out there campaigning is, why are you hiring Nazis? Do you support hiring Nazis? Of course they don't support hiring Nazis. But now you're in this weird primary situation where you have to try to distance. And this is why it's a complete mess.
This is why real Republicans like you are continually aghast and frustrated and miserable at everything associated with
Exactly.
Here is a confusing one. I'm not sure where you're going to land. Ukrainian Winter Olympics skeleton athlete. That preamble there was to distinguish that he's not a physical skeleton. He competes in the skeleton. Vladislav Haraskevich was disqualified from the skeleton after competing with a helmet showing images of war dead in Ukraine, violating Olympic political neutrality rules. I got to admit, Matt, I don't know that there's a simple up-down on this for me, but where did you land?
Yeah, I have the same problem. I'm going to say up on this one, and let me explain. The Olympics long has had political undertones going back to Nazi Germany. The rules do exist to say you can't do it. And so these are clear. But the reason I'm up for it is because he knew it and did it anyway. And he risked everything that he has trained his entire life to do, to talk about his country and his countrymen who have been killed and to bring this message forward. He was willing to sacrifice everything just to bring attention to his country.
I completely agree with that. I understand the rule against political demonstration, political speech at the Olympics, but sometimes the principle is worth letting go of something because it matters so much. And this is such a case. Tommy Smith and John Carlos in the 68 Olympics, the fist raised, Black Power salute. You might not have totally agreed with it, but they felt on principle that what they were expressing was worth it. It was worth giving up medals. It was worth disqualification in this case. And I agree with this athlete. This is worth it.
Last one, low information voters. A pre-election poll showed that low information voters backed Trump 60-40. A January follow-up showed approval among this group dropping to 43%. That's a 25-point shift. And it was critical to Trump's 2024 election. Matt, what's your take, up or down, on where we are on low information voters and their apparent shift away from Trump?
I'm way, way up on this, but I don't want to say too much more because this is going to be the subject of my dose of hope. So I hope people will hang on for the end of the show for that. But just as a little teaser, this is a huge, huge number. The most significant polling number that I've seen in a long time. And it means big trouble for MAGA. So I'm way up on this.
Yeah, I'm up on it too. In politics, we always bring this down to the lowest denominator. People live on sound bites. So it's not surprising that's how people are making their news decisions. But what I do think is there's other things now that are really starting to drive it. Like we talked about with Minnesota and the immigration crackdown, those images are just going to last forever. They're going to drive it. It's not what we voted for. It's not where we are. The economy, there's a lot of information here that I think can be contributing to it. But what I do see is he's been discovered as the emperor has no clothes. MAGA is a fraud. And we're starting to see that more in poll after poll and instance after instance. So anytime we start to kind of come to our senses, I'm going to be up on it.
Hey, speaking of MAGA fraud, that does it for our up-down segment. And now it's time to turn to That's Bullshit.
Bullshit. Bullshit. Bullshit.
Bullshit.
A bullshit?
Donald Trump just made an announcement that he described as
One of the most transformative healthcare initiatives of all time. It's called Trump RX. This launch represents the largest reduction in prescription drug prices in history by many, many times.
But that's bullshit. For one thing, he tries to give the impression that it's a way to get access to new, lower prices for medicine.
Starting tonight, dozens of the most commonly used prescription drugs will be available at dramatic discounts for all consumers.
But actually,
It's just a website linking you to discounts drug companies already offer.
that's right. It's mostly a place to find the coupons that drug companies were already offering, like you might do at the back of a supermarket circular.
There's never been anything like it.
There's never been anything like it before, except for
Saving with GoodRx is simple. Just type in the name of your drug, search prices to compare at nearby pharmacies. Select your favorite to reveal the GoodRx coupon, show it to your pharmacist, and save.
But it's not just that Trump is slapping up a website that lists what big drug companies are already offering, that replicates an existing private sector tool and claiming it's something revolutionary. The core hogwash of all of this is the claim that it's going to reduce prescription drug prices at all, let alone the largest reduction in history. There's only less than 50 drugs on the website, and
a lot of these drugs are older and there are generic alternatives for these medications. The pharmaceutical companies were not looking to give discounts on their bestsellers, their newest drugs. There is a warning even, if you have insurance, you might be able to get a discount that is better.
That's right. The scammiest part of this is that half the drugs on Trump RX have cheaper generics widely available. Most of the drugs aren't the newest, most popular ones. They've been on the market for a median of 26 years. So most of them aren't big profit drivers for drug companies anymore. Trump RX just gives them a way to squeeze some last drops of profit out. But what's really frustrating in all of this is that there are actually some good things that the Trump White House is doing. The GLP-1 drugs Wegovy and Ozempic are included on the website. Even Bernie Sanders said that this is something that could benefit many Americans. What's tragic is that if we had a somewhat normal president, they could have said, hey, we're putting up a free website. It's not revolutionary, but it's a good start that makes it easier for you to save some money and get access to some incredible drugs. And we're going to keep working on it and expanding it. It would have been hard for anyone to object, especially if they had included some Democratic Party ideas. They could have made some progress and everyone would have looked great. But this president can't do that. So instead of celebrating some nuggets of good, we're just left with a pile of bullshit.
Wow, what a great look. Everybody knows I hate Trump RX, but wow, that was just amazing. Great insights, great take. More people just need to be paying attention to that. Wow.
From your lips to God's ears. Speaking of elevating our conversation, let's close out, as we always do, with our dose of hope.
For my dose of hope, I want to go a little bit back to my Trump dump here and get into Super Bowl a little bit. It is officially campaign season. And one of my favorite parts isn't the debates or the crosstabs. It's the campaign commercials. I collect the weird, the funny, the unintentionally hysterical ads every cycle, kind of like tuning in for the Super Bowl just to watch the commercials. And this year is already delivering, because the ShamWow guy is running for Congress in Texas. Yes, that ShamWow guy, the infomercial pitchman behind the super absorbent towels and the slapdash TV gadgets, is now a Republican candidate in Texas' 31st district, challenging a longtime incumbent and campaigning to destroy wokeism. I want you to watch this ad.
Hey, it's Vince. I'm running for Congress against this guy. Stop having a politician that's worse than Biden.
That's discretionary funding.
Instead, vote for me, a guy who's not half dead. I'm gonna soak up the swamp, clean the house, and pick up those liberal tears at the same time. I'm gonna slap chop the nuts out of the woke, making less blue-haired commies and more red-blooded Americans. Vote for me so I can represent you and the ones that can't stand up for themselves.
Vote for ShamWow!
Paid for by offer Vince ShamWow Shlomi for Congress.
Now, look, I don't know if he's going to make a great lawmaker, but let's be honest. Anyone who can walk into a camera holding an ultrasound picture that says vote for ShamWow is already given us some of the most memorable, entertaining moments of the season. And honestly, that's a good thing. Politics doesn't have to be heavy every second of the day. Yes, there are serious issues. Yes, there are real fights ahead. But part of living in a free country is embracing the absurdity of it all, the unexpected candidates, the over-the-top ads, the moments that make you laugh out loud. And if we can't find the humor in it, we'll lose our minds. Democracy is noisy. It's chaotic. Sometimes it's ridiculous, but it's also open. Anyone can raise their hand. Anyone can run, even the ShamWow guy. In a year that feels tense and angry, remembering that politics can still be a little weird and a little funny might be exactly the dose of hope we need.
For my dose of hope, I wanted to pick up on the news item we discussed earlier that low information voters have done a major about face on the president. Now, it's hard for me to overstate how huge this is. One of the most important and misunderstood aspects of politics is just how tuned out most people are. It's not necessarily a judgment on them, not at all. People have lives to lead, kids to pick up from school, groceries to buy, and bankruptcies to file after they buy those groceries. But for those of us who pay a lot of attention to politics and news and current events, it's hard to fathom how little most people are paying attention and how different our perceptions are from our other fellow Americans who don't have the time or inclination to be as focused on these things. And that's why we ended up in the situation we're in. Analysis of the 2024 election results showed that people who pay some or a lot of attention to the news actually favored Kamala Harris by 6 points. People who pay little or no attention to the news favored Donald Trump by 19 points. In other words, the less you're paying attention, the more you tend to like Trump. But now that's changing. Reminds me of the old Bob Marley line, you can fool some people sometime, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And as much as I think everyone in a democracy should be informed and educated on the issues so we can make good decisions together, I know that's become increasingly hard as credible sources of news and information have dried up or gotten whacked by bald-headed billionaires like Bezos. But despite all of that, the truth is breaking through. Voters are seeing what's going on. They're saying, we were willing to put up with some of this bullshit because we thought you, Trump, would improve our lives. You're not. More and more, they're saying, we're done. That's not necessarily going to hold for all time. There will be ups and downs. But it's at least a glimmer that our democracy is catching up to reality, and we may get through all of this. And on that bright, uplifting note for Matt, I'm Matt. We'll see you next time.